Yo, it's your boy Logos, and today I wanted to finish where we left off yesterday and react to the truth about black Republicans from FD Signifier. Of course, in the first part, I disagree with most of the stuff he said, but there was some stuff that I did agree with. I don't believe that both parties truly give a damn about us, and it's up to the people to, I don't want to say just rip up the whole system, but at least get the politicians and the corruption from corporations and military-industrial complex out. But I don't support Marxism, socialism, or any other stuff that it seems that this guy supports. So let's see what the rest of the video has to say.
Is a deliberate and sophisticated distortion of Black American political history that is hiding our socialist nature in plain sight, to the point where, as I call Black people socialists, I know there's lots of Black people watching right now who probably themselves believe in socialism, cringing at the idea. Today, we see Black political action as well as Black radical politics as somehow tied to the Democratic Party and neoliberal ideologies, where the fact is that Black history in America and Black political power has a deep and strong connection to what is considered today far left ideologies. And contrary to what your Hotep cousin is saying about soy milk or corn, this is actually the real information the powers that be don't want you to realize. They don't want you to know that Black conservatism, whether Republican or Democrat, has set us up for failure, and the real political power for Black people historically has been through Black leftists. And because I know some people are looking at me sideways, to prove it, I want to talk about just how much you don't actually know about America's Black leftist history. I want to talk about one of America's most iconic Black leftists, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Before I really get into King, I want to set the stage by talking about an obscure cartoon from Cartoon Network from like 2010 called Freaknik the Musical.
First place prize is a lifetime supply, get this, a lifetime supply of money, clothes, and guess what? Hoes! Straight up, that's what it is,
Just follow me for a second. This cartoon is a relic of its time in many ways. It hasn't aged well in a lot of ways, but it's also incredibly insightful, like kind of subversive from a radical perspective looking at it today, because it had this prescient and complex conflict between Black art, Black excellence, and Black liberation. Specifically, there's this narrative element in it that has stuck with me since I saw it over a decade ago, which is the concept of the boule. The main villains of this story are a secret society of hyper-rich and extremely powerful Black folks who ostensibly control Black culture and Black media and use it to shake down white institutions.
I thought white people took care of this Freaknik back in '98.
Well, somehow the motherfucker go back and brought his little funky ass party with him.
If Freaknik gets too popular.
Was that Charlie Murphy? Hey, rest in peace, Charlie Murphy. That was him. Let me listen to that again, man. He a legend.
Back and brought his little funky ass party with
I'm 95% sure that Charlie Murphy I know that from Chappelle's show, and also from the Boondocks, man. Him voicing, damn, I can't think of the two characters' name right now, but the two white guys, man, they're funny as hell. Him and Samuel Jackson.
him.
If Freaknik gets too popular, we could lose all the influence we have over Black culture.
Everyone, chill the f off out. Reverend, why don't you go down to Atlanta and pay our little freaky friend a visit?
This society includes well-known Black mega-rich folks like Oprah, Al Sharpton, Bob Johnson, etc., and they are furious that the spirit of Freaknik has been resurrected and it might wrestle control of Black culture from them. So they, the Black elite, remember that, set out to stop this grassroots movement of poor and working class Black folks. They do this by first trying to undermine them, then attempting to co-opt them, and finally sending a giant robot zombie Al Sharpton to destroy them. It sounds silly, and I know it's left field, but just give it a little while. I'm gonna come back to it. Just remember this for later.
Spring break is officially over.
You'll often hear many a politician and political pundit quote MLK as an influence. Extra points if a conservative misappropriates MLK to somehow defend their racism. He has his own holiday. He has plenty of children's books. He was even a DLC character on Fortnite.
The fuck?
I still can't believe that's real. But I should, because MLK in his modern image is one of the most thorough and grotesque examples of how capitalism and white supremacy work together to co-opt something. To co-opt something in a political sense or a social science sense is to take something from its original state in use and over time recontextualize it to be something completely different. Extra points if it ends up serving the exact opposite of its original use.
Bling bling, bling bling, bling bling, bling bling, bling bling,
Bling bling. Bling bling. Bling bling. Bling bling.
Some are surely thinking that calling MLK a leftist is absurd. King was a
Is this pointing that it's trying to say white people adopting, like, you know, slang is like co-opting the word? Listen, man, I really don't care if white people use slang. I really don't understand why people give a damn either. Sometimes it sounds fine, sometimes it sounds cringe. Either way, it's not going to really affect your life. So I really don't see the big deal of it. People adopt words from different cultures all the time. We seem to only want to bitch and moan when white people do it. Get over it.
reverend and a devout Christian. And King is on record in letters to Coretta Scott King calling himself anti-capitalist and saying that he's closer to being a communist or socialist than a capitalist. While I assume King's religious beliefs would put him in more traditional ideology around gender and family, he also worked directly with Bayard Rustin, who was openly gay at the time. And if you look beyond the co-opted image of King and the people he ran with, you see where his political inclinations lie. King ran with a bunch of black socialists. And another thing that's important is that King came up during the early 50s, right after the Red Scare, and understood that really being out there for communist or socialist ideologies would stop the black civil rights movement dead in its tracks and make anything that he was doing pretty much a non-starter from jump. So any and all elements of socialism that were involved in his politics were subdued or hidden and really proliferated by the people he ran with. White people took MLK from a radical activist who was widely hated by the vast majority of white America to being Black Santa Claus, who became the president of the United States after freeing the slaves or something. And by white people, I mean Ronald Reagan. It was Reagan who made MLK a federal holiday in the 80s in an attempt to appeal to black voters. And in the process, he made sure to shave off the more radical edges of MLK's legacy. MLK was a radical. His roots were in the traditions of pacifist movements, but they were still aggressively anti-establishment, anti-capitalist, and dangerous to the status quo.
I don't get how MLK being a socialist or being a radical is supposed to influence me to go along with the ideology. Just because I agree with MLK on certain social issues doesn't mean I agree with him politically or economically. Like, I don't get the point there, honestly.
And in the years directly before his death, King became more and more sympathetic to black radical and aggressive action for liberation.
So there's just so much misinformation and misunderstanding. One of the things that's misunderstood is that the I Have a Dream speech was more radical than it's given credit for in general. Another thing, more importantly, that I think is misunderstood is that William Sullivan, who was then working for Hoover's FBI, in even the pre-counterintelligence program days, already said that he said King must be targeted and surveilled and managed as someone who was considered to be the most dangerous Negro in terms of bringing the Negroes over to communism.
We often imagine King essentially dying after the I Have a Dream speech in 1963. I haven't went back to watch like all the various, assembly movies and videos that I think all of us watched in the 80s and 90s and 2000s about Martin Luther King. They're probably still showing them to my son. But the movie always ends with him in the March on Washington saying, "I have a dream today."
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
There's no better example of how black political thought and ideology has been co-opted and sanitized for modern American political thought and ideology than to look at what happened before, during, and after the March on Washington. For example, did you know that Martin Luther King wasn't even planning to attend at first? It was a last-minute audible called by President Kennedy himself to get him there to hopefully tamp down on the original plans for the march, which were much more left-leaning and much more likely to erupt into direct action, aka civil unrest. The inconvenient truth was that this crowning moment for Martin Luther King was actually a psyop from the very beginning. And one of the biggest detractors that really gives us the truth as to what happened during this moment is Malcolm X himself, who remarked on how the march was co-opted when it was given the green light by the United States government. According to Malcolm and reports of the time, the civil rights movement had kind of stalled out. Organizations are running out of funds, energy was low, things weren't working as perfectly as they needed to be, and the people were getting restless and more willing to take action and rise up. The March on Washington started as a more grassroots and explicitly work and labor oriented movement. And it was King and many other of the more established black leaders that came in and changed it from being a radical threat to the establishment to King's crowning moment and basically the end of racism, if you listen to what Republicans say about King now.
We're going to march on Washington, march on the Senate, march on the White House, march on the Congress, and tie it up, bring it to a halt. Don't let the government proceed. They even said they was going to go out to the airport and lay down on the runway and don't let no airplanes land.
The marchers have been instructed to bring no signs. Signs were provided. They have been told to sing one song, "We Shall Overcome." They've been told how to arrive, when, where to arrive, where to assemble, when to start marching, the route to the march. First aid stations were strategically located, even where to faint. Yes, I was there. I observed that circus. Whoever heard of angry revolutionists all harmonizing "We shall overcome someday" while tripping and swaying along arm in arm with the very people they were supposed to be angrily revolting against? Whoever heard of angry revolutionists swinging their bare feet together with the oppressors in lily pad park pools with gospels and guitars and "I Have a Dream" speeches?
Malcolm illustrates how black movements have really always been co-opted, probably since slavery, as movements get steam, or maybe as they run out of steam, or get desperate, or maybe even get more radical and get close to serious change. Before that really can happen, white interest and power structures begin to infiltrate and find a way to curtail the radical potential of these movements. Radical change becomes policy reform. Defund the police becomes retrain the police.
Which I have no problem with. I think defunding the police is stupid. You should provide more funding so they can get proper training and so they can not be forced into very dangerous, high-stress situations without the proper training to act accordingly. Our military get trained over and over and over again when they're going off to combat, but police who be in high-stress situations that could cause PTSD doesn't receive the amount of training that they should. I don't see what the issue with that is. And the thing about quote-unquote co-opting movements and whatever, I don't think it's crazy to expect the government to try to mitigate a problem before it becomes a larger issue. In my opinion, I think if you see there's an issue, you should work quickly to fix it. And I do agree that the government should work a lot faster during the civil rights era and even before that to end certain inequalities that going on society-wise or politically-wise, but that doesn't mean I'm in support of radicals. And just because MLK or Malcolm X supported socialism or Marxism doesn't mean I'm just falling in line like a sheep because these certain black people believe it.
Or fund the police, actually. But even still, speeches from John Lewis and Philip Randolph were criticized because of their communist undertones, with Randolph having such bars as,
"It falls to the Negro to reassert this proper priority of values, because our ancestors were transformed from human personalities into private property. It falls to us to demand new forms of social planning, to create full employment, and to put automation at the service of human needs, not at the service of profits for."
So you see what this was really supposed to be about, because it was Randolph and Lewis's march to begin with. And this speech is often treated like the end of King's story, as if he was assassinated the next day, dying for all of America's sins and allowing for the signing of the Civil Rights Bill and ending racism forever, but that's not what happened. King wasn't assassinated until 5 years later. And in that 5 years of time, especially in the years right before King was killed, he became more and more amenable to radical and pro-black sentiment.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. Today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
And this is partially due to another major figure invisibilized by history, one Stokely Carmichael, later to be known as Kwame Ture.
As the years went on, King became even more radical, went even more to the left. And I've been talking a lot lately about a new book that came out recently called Prophet of Discontent that I would encourage everyone to read. But the point is that he was ever becoming more radical and to the left, and ever involving himself more with anti-colonial theory, anti-imperialist theory, anti-capitalist theory. King is quoted in an exchange most people are not made aware of, with Andy Young, who was still a major player in Black conservative politics, funding, supporting many Black conservative efforts, branded as an extension of Dr. King. But in this moment, we're reminded that Dr. King called him out and said, Andy, the problem you have is that you're still a capitalist and I'm not.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
Ture, still going as Carmichael at the time, became the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, aka SNCC, in 1966, and was one of the leading voices behind the concept of Black Power, and was at the time a burgeoning Pan-Africanist and socialist himself. When you hear King, only a year before his death, talking about changes of the heart, he's talking about the fact that Carmichael and Malcolm X and other more radical figures might have been leading to some things in the right direction. It's during this time period where you hear King to begin to touch on redistribution of wealth, reparations, anti-colonialism, speaking against the war in Vietnam. His public approval had risen in the years leading up to.
You don't have to be against. See, here's the thing. I'm against the war in Vietnam, but I'm not a socialist. You can have certain point of views and have certain perspectives, but still don't be a socialist or a Marxist or anarchist. That's the thing. I can agree with Martin Luther King on certain things, but that doesn't mean I agree with him on being a radical. That doesn't mean I want to just tear up the whole system and hope that this new system that we have years and years of evidence of not working in this place and just see what happens. No.
And right after the March on Washington, but like many Black leaders before and after him, once King started to more boldly challenge the borders of American hegemony, he was back to being public enemy number one. And it's not long after this time that James L. Ray, a meager 2-bit crook of a man, too dumb and untalented to make it in the U.S. military, that also, from what I understand, somehow had the money to pay for plastic surgery in the 60s, stalked MLK for weeks before shooting and killing him with a single bullet in a single shot that doesn't match the rifle it was supposedly fired from, all while standing on top of a bathtub. That's the official story.
And the FBI killed Martin Luther King. Private property's inherently theft.
Okay. See, this is like the meme where they say, you had me in the first half, I ain't gonna lie. Because I believe, too, that Martin Luther King was assassinated by the FBI after hearing the evidence surrounding the supposed assassin and how the MLK family fought for the supposed assassin, James L. Ray, to be released and prove that he is actually innocent and the government actually killed MLK. And from my memory, they actually sued the government or whatever and sent the trial and had the evidence and stuff reviewed. And they only sued for like $1 because the whole point was not to get money from the government, but to prove the fact that they actually did kill MLK. So I agree with that part. But then this fuck, he comes in with this dumbass Sacco like a fucking first grader talking about some private properties inherently theft. Theft from who? Bitch, I bought it. It's not yours. You didn't do anything to get it. So who am I stealing it from? It belongs to nobody. I got it for myself because I purchased it. I owned it. is my land, and I could do whatever the hell I want with it. You, oh, let me just. I actually got to hear it one more time. This is nonsense.
I killed Martin Luther King. Private property's inherently theft.
Inherently theft. These people, I swear, it just sounds like they don't want to do shit. They don't want to have people who are competent or have merit or are good at things. They don't want them to be rewarded for being good at certain things. They want everybody to get the same thing no matter how much you put into it or how good you are at it. And that's just not how it's gonna work out. And I don't understand or respect their whole new idea of socialism or their theory or philosophy of socialism that is somehow different from Stalin or Marx or any of these other dictators in these socialist societies that we see in the past or today in China or Russia. How you somehow your system gonna be better or different. You are rooting capitalism and everything that we do have in our society that lets you purchase that damn microphone that you use. You're gonna just uproot all those systems up there and place your system, and hopefully it works out without any mess ups and death and destruction or famine we've seen over and over again. No, not taking that chance with your nonsense. I would just root out the corruption and go from there.
This image of King as a man completely against civil unrest who wanted to just end segregation so his black children could play with little white children. The smiling, waving King that was moderate and dignified and passive. That's the official story. But that's not the real story.
The young militants are in the revolutionary spirit, and they are concerned about revolutionizing certain values that have been existing in our society that need to be revolutionized. And I think the other thing that we must see is that, as President Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible only make violent revolution inevitable.
The reality is that King was a figurehead of a populist black leftist movement in the 1950s and 60s, a movement that was greatly influenced by various prominent black socialists at the time, such as A. Philip Randolph, Ella Baker, Bayard Rustin, W.E.B. Du Bois, etc. A movement which had often explicit goals for fair labor practices, reparations, healthcare, and where local grassroots organizing was key. A movement that on many occasions erupted into spontaneous civil unrest. They teach the civil rights movement every year from February 1st to February 28th. They show Their Eyes Are on the Prize and all these other movies, and they teach about these figures, but they always leave out the political ideology that made that movement happen in the first place.
Because it's not the job of the government and public education to push a certain ideology on children. Leave that to their parents and the children decide for themselves. Like, just because you're a fucking socialist doesn't mean children need to be a socialist like you. Especially not when they're like 13, 12 years old and all they're used to is getting stuff from their parents. Of course, it's gonna go along with getting more free shit. Come on.
Why do you think that is?
I think one of the main obstacles that persist in terms of particularly black political constituents re-engaging, and the most important term there is re-engaging their left political traditions, is the fact that we live in the space of what we at This is Revolution podcast call the 50-plus year counter-revolution. The 50-plus year counter-revolution is basically the concept is that since the assassination of Martin Luther King in 1968, the politics of American society have been a counter-revolution against the policies of the 60s, or what was called the New Deal Civil Rights Coalition. There is an increase of conservatism in terms of the political aspirational choices that are presented to black people, but none of them include an actual discussion of the fact that, listen, black people have been challenging capitalism politically since the 19th century. People like Hewitt Harrison, Cyril Briggs, Du Bois, Paul Robeson, Ella Baker, Bayard Rustin were all socialists and communists. They were, at one time in Chicago, 25% of the Communist Party were actually black folk. The larger point I'm trying to convey to you is that it is not accidental that in the contemporary media age, there has been a consistent effort to divorce black people from the political tradition of leftism, challenging capitalism, socialism, democracy.
How's it a political tradition if you just say it's only 20%? That's a minority.
Democratic socialism or even communism, because the political establishment or the ruling class, if you will, is well aware that that would be the linchpin in having that politics become more popularized in the consciousness of the body politic.
What Reagan and most Americans, including many black Americans, leave out are Martin Luther King's socialist leanings, that he and most of the civil rights legends that we celebrate today were amenable to socialism because they recognized capitalism as the economic aspect of white supremacy, and they knew that black oppression was not going to be solved within the existing system. Now, was King about to put on the Antifa mask and throw bricks at cop cars? No, but he also understood that the riot was the language of the unheard.
If you are stupid enough to, and I'll just end this part too like this, if you're really stupid enough to set fire to shit and throw bricks at cop cars, and they shoot you or they take your ass down and slam you, I'm not gonna feel bad for your dumb ass. Because why are you doing stuff like that? Why are you acting like a goddamn animal? Like, you're destroying property and you're possibly injuring, or if they're very unlucky, killing somebody because of your feelings and you're upset. And I'm supposed to feel like you're justified because you feel oppressed? Nah, that's just nonsense. And I don't care what black leader, how far back they go, or how many people who had the same skin color as me supported socialism. Doesn't mean I'm just gonna fall in line like a little robot and support socialism. I don't support socialism. I look at the evidence of it, and I don't see how it could end up in a good thing if we just uprooted capitalism and put in socialism and expect things to just go hunky-dory and just fine. You only have one life to live. I'm not going to spend the next 50, 60, or however much of my life trying to fight off starvation or famine or whatever because our country collapsed because, for one, we want to try out socialism, or two, we don't want to root out corruption. I'm always in favor of rooting out corruption instead of trying to root out capitalism. I'm much more in favor of capitalism than I am in Marxism. Just because we have crony capitalism or corrupted capitalism among our politicians, corporations, and military industrial complex doesn't mean the system in of itself is bad. But that's just me. It's your boy Logos. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.